Good morning, Toby. Thank you very much for joining us. Can we get clarity from you? We believe that the consumption of pangolins, the illegal trade in pangolins, actually caused COVID-19, but we've also heard talk of bats. What is the very latest thinking on the role, if any, of pangolins in this?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me on today. I must stress that the research is still going on as to exactly how COVID was transmitted from wildlife, which is pretty established it was, into the human form. It is a concept called zoonosis, which is the transmission of a disease from a vertebrate mammal into humans. Previously, we've had lots of examples of this, ranging from SARS, MERS, Zika, even HIV. So there is a possible connection. The most likely one is from the consumption of wildlife species, though. Where that originated is most probably in China, obviously. Maybe in the markets, the unregulated wildlife markets in China.
So this is important. It's not just about pangolins, and they are the most traded animals in the world. They are terribly vulnerable. I was wondering if at this time, with all these concerns around, maybe pangolins could be behind this and that it was the human consumption of pangolins that may have caused COVID-19, whether the illegal trade has slowed at all. Is it possible to monitor at this point?
Unfortunately, it's very difficult. Nobody has accurate numbers of exactly how many pangolins there are. There are incredibly secretive animals, so there isn't really a base number for us to work with. The big problem we have is not actually the consumption of the meat itself. There are 4 Asian species of pangolins and 4 African species of pangolins. The 4 Asian species are consumed for their meat predominantly. They're used in almost ritualistic dining to celebrate a big business deal in the Far East as well, which is going to be a problem. But for me, the biggest problem we have is the use in traditional Chinese medicines of the pangolin parts, predominantly the scales, obviously. And that goes for other species as well, because that's what's being shipped from Africa to the Far East to satisfy the demand. So yes, we're calling for an end to the consumption of wildlife, but not just the meat, but it's also for consumption as a protein source, but also consumption in traditional Chinese medicines.
So it's difficult, you're saying, to assess whether the South African poaching of pangolins has gone down because of the global lockdown. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was watching a news report this morning with a gentleman in Uganda saying that temporarily they're seeing less instances of poaching of pangolins as well. But unfortunately, you're dealing with thousands of years of belief in these medicinal properties. So I can only see it increasing. One danger which could exist is the pangolin species most commonly related to COVID was an Asian species. So suddenly maybe they'll regard African species as maybe being COVID-free. Nonetheless, I hope that what it's done is it's really raised awareness more than anything that applied to the pangolin specifically.
This campaign, this global campaign, End the Trade, such an important campaign, particularly as this morning the South African Police Service has just sent out a release about an hour or so, I guess, about the arrest of 3 people in Mpumalanga in possession of 6 rhino horn, believed to be from 3 rhinos. I mean, rhino poaching is another issue that is a massive, massive problem in South Africa. So it's not, as you say, just pangolin. It is all illegal animals, all animals and the trade in animals. And it seems that it continues, certainly regarding the rhino, during the lockdown.
Well, I mean, precisely. This is one of the big problems that we're facing at the moment from the tourism industry, is that with less people on the ground, and I speak specifically of tourists on the ground in wildlife areas, of footfall, of funding for rangers and conservationists, the people are turning, it's desperate times. People are going to turn to protein sources of money, for example. So there may well be instances, and I'd like to stress that the same poaching networks are responsible probably for rhinos as well as pangolins, as well as perlemon, as well as cycads. So, a lot of this is trafficked down the same routes as well. So, yeah, it's a horrible thing to have happened.
I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with supporting a call to stop the illegal trade in pangolin and rhino and that sort of thing. But what difference will a campaign like this actually make?
Well, what's really encouraging with this campaign is it is a coalition, a true coalition of some very big, heavy hitters coming together to to come together. Now, our mantra at Pangolin Africa has always been teaming up to save a species. So when the Wildlife Conservation Organisation, the Wildlife Conservation Society, Wild Aid, Humane Society, these are very big organisations coming together. Conservation has tended to be a little bit factional, with different species being cared for. But the people who've signed up so far to join this coalition are from all over the world, all sorts of protection going on for different species, whether it be sea mammals right up to, primates or, everything. So reptiles. So what really pleases me is they're coming together, and I hope that, governments will sit and wake up. I see the Chinese government are immediately clamping down on what they call the wet markets. Now, it has to be stressed that not all wet markets are selling wildlife. Wet markets could be seen as being like our farmers' markets, fresh produce for sale. But a small number of those are selling wildlife animals, and those need to be clamped down upon. But again, the Chinese government need to step up and also ban the use of rhino horns, pangolin scales and such in traditional Chinese medicines, and really clamp down on those to reduce the demand.
Thank you so much for your time. Let's hope that global effort does raise awareness and create more collaboration to fight the illegal trade in animals. That was Toby German, Director of Pangolin Africa.